Alright, so imagining you had everything finished out in the comic, we now want to just get it ready for final output. In some cases, if you're just sending this to a professional printer, they could very well take your Adobe Illustrator file. The only thing they would ask you to do ahead of time is to outline all of your text and possibly convert all your strokes to shapes. And to do that, it's not too hard to do it. It just depends. So if they say they could accept an Illustrator file, but all text has to be outlined, and the reason why they do that is they might not have your font, and you could send them the font file and they could install it, but they'd probably prefer that you just outline everything. So what you'd have to do is you would select text, and you would have type, create outlines, and then now your text is all a shape. It's no longer editable. I can't go with the type tool and change it anymore. The other part is we have strokes in our artwork, and mainly I've got that in the text. So let me go ahead and outline all of this text. Type, create outlines. So now my text is no longer editable, and that includes these little bylines. So I have to make sure I get all of the text on the page. So that's where it's best to have all your text on one layer, because you could just select all. Everything that's on the text layer then gets type, create outlines. Now all text has been changed over. The other part is we have a stroke color. So I would select everything. We could select everything again, and we would go and choose Object, Path, Outline, Stroke. Now everything is a shape, and we wouldn't have any issues with strokes, because it shouldn't be much of an issue, but sometimes going from one person's computer to another, there could be slight variances on how the computer generates the stroke. You would think 1 point is 1 point on all computers, but just to make sure, we go ahead and outline everything. So now everything's locked down, and I can save this. So this would be one file that I could possibly send them, and maybe they can just take the Illustrator file as is. If not, and they want a PDF, we can come up here to File, Save As, and we'll just call it the same file name, but we will change it to PDF, and we hit Save. Now in this case, I'd want to choose press quality. That's going to give the highest quality, although since this is all raster, it really won't make a difference. Unless we had some raster effects that we had put in here, or maybe you had brought in a raster background image, then it would matter. Alright, so if there's anything raster in your file or your creation here, you would want to make sure it's press quality. But since it's vector, it really doesn't matter. But this is fine, and we'll just hit Save PDF, and you now have a PDF file version of your comic. And you would be able to send them a PDF, and the PDF really should be universally acceptable to just about any printer out there. Now if you were sending this for a web comic, you can save this for web, and we would go here to File, Export. Now this particular version of Illustrator has Save for Web Legacy. This will be going away in future versions of Illustrator, but we can do Export As, and we could choose PNG or JPEG. Now the problem with that is it's not going to be web optimized per se. So that's kind of where you have some issues. And also if you do PNG, all of this space is going to be transparent, because let me just show you, and which is maybe fine, because if they're printing on white paper, then if it's transparent it's fine. But maybe You just want to make sure there's white in the background. So we could do a white background. Right now, let's see here. If I do a shape, let's go about that big. We'll draw it about that big as well. Alright, and right now as a background you can see that a lot shows through on the color. So even if this was gray, there's a lot of transparency in my artwork. So to make sure that there's always a white background, I could make it white. Now when we're looking at it in Illustrator you can't see it, but when you save this as a PNG file, then that preserves that transparency. Let's go ahead and do the export feature. And well, let's see, I wonder if Save As has a feature for web. I don't see it. SVG is another web file that you could give somebody. Depends on your web developer. You could send them an SVG file and freak them out, and they might not know what that file is. But actually, an SVG file should work just fine on the web. You just don't see it used a lot, so some web developers could be thrown off by that file type. Most of the time, they're looking for a JPEG or a PNG file. So let's go ahead and save that. We'll do export, save for web. And we get several options here. I got a lot of presets. I'm going to choose, I guess I got to close that. It gives you a preview of what your comic is going to look like. And I'm going to just use PNG 24. Now the drawback about this is it's not web optimized per se, so that could create some issues on file size, but I would let them worry about that. If you chose JPEG, we could do JPEG low. It's going to fill in the black. You can see it does a lot of pixelation. So to preserve the quality, let's just stick with PNG 24. We've got a fair amount of transparent all the way around, and whoever you send this to, they might have more specifications on what these dimensions need to be, and that'd be up to you. But once you had this ready, you would hit save, and you can name it by the same name, put it on the desktop or wherever you're saving your comics. Don't want to hide the extension. So PNG, Portable Network Graphic, is a web type font that does preserve transparency, but it also keeps things pretty crisp. And as I mentioned, you also could have sent them an SVG. SVG keeps everything vector, and it can be displayed on websites. So if you've created your artwork in all vector and you want to keep that really contained to vector art and not rasterize it again, which PNG will do, send them the SVG. Otherwise, PNG is a good option after that. And some people will insist on a JPEG. You can do that. You'll see a little loss of quality with a JPEG. Sometimes it's negligible and you won't notice the difference. But I guess it depends on what you're doing with your website, how small the file sizes need to get, and so forth. Alright, so there you go. That would be your output and your final comic.